Hi everyone, welcome to our lively discussion. My name is Jennifer Sterling and I'm from the University of North Texas, and I'll go ahead and let my colleagues introduce themselves.
I'm Jill Dawson, Electronic Resources Librarian.
I'm Emily Peebles, Collection Strategist Librarian.
And I'm Allyson Rodriguez, Head of Collection Development, all at UNT.
Today we're going to be talking about cultivating cooperation, creating the vendor reciprocity scale. And I'll be giving a brief introduction about our process, and then I'll show a draft of our vendor reciprocity scale. First though, we'd like to talk about a code of conduct. As you're all probably aware, the conference does have its own code of conduct. But we thought it would be a good idea to give some good ground rules given the topic of conversation. So first of all, we're not going to engage in or allow divisive or disrespectful discourse regarding any librarians or vendors. We would encourage listening to understand instead of listening to respond. As much as possible, we encourage you to use I statements from a subjective point of view. Today we would like to hear from a variety of perspectives, so we reserve the right to limit speaking time for each individual to ensure everyone has a fair opportunity to participate in the discussion. So just a little bit of background from us. As again, we're from the Collection Development Department at the University of North Texas, and over the past several years, we have experienced significant department turnover. We have also experienced a couple of state legislature changes in Texas. One of those is called TexRAMP. It's a state Senate bill. And that state Senate bill is a standardized approach for security assessment, authorization, and continuous monitoring of cloud computing services that process data of a state agency, and that includes universities. So anytime we purchase a new electronic resource, we have to ask vendors questions to make sure that the resource is in compliance with this law. Accessibility is also one of the new requirements according to the state legislature change. This is a positive change. We are now legally required to make sure our electronic resources are accessible. Again, we also want to make sure that our electronic resources are accessible. But we have to ask all of our vendors for a VPAT. If we have already worked with a vendor, we're probably going to ask them for an updated VPAT too. This is just covering all of our bases, and that's what our Office of General Counsel has asked us to do. So we're going to continuously be updating our VPATs to meet those legal requirements. So all of these changes that have taken place have really added to our workload, and it makes workload planning quite difficult. It makes a lot of it feel really beyond your control sometimes when you don't know how much time your work is going to change. So all of these changes gave us the idea for a vendor reciprocity scale. And we started asking questions amongst ourselves like, what would we have liked to have known as a new librarian when working with vendors? And how can we set up our new employees for success? And how can we track interactions with our vendors? So let's talk a little bit about the process that we went through when we came up with our vendor reciprocity scale. First, we brainstormed the pain points that we had in our work. And when we started doing this work, we realized that a vendor reciprocity scale would really fit in with an operational plan that we do every year within our division. So when we did that, we started writing the outline for an operational plan. Then we met to discuss the different categories that would go into a vendor reciprocity scale, and we worked together and wrote a few examples. Then we split into individuals and we completed the different criteria and definitions. We then moved all of the criteria and categories into Excel, and then we discussed those. And now we're here at the Charleston conference so that we can get your feedback on the VRS. The next steps that we see in the VRS, we would like to use the suggestions that we get from y'all and collect those and enhance any of the areas that might be still unclear. And then we would like to calibrate any areas for accuracy. Then we would set up the workflow and processes and guidelines that we would use. And we would also begin the documentation process. We do already see some potential challenges in using the VRS. One of those would be the individuals versus the whole company. Individuals are very different, and right now we're looking at considering an overview of the whole company and our interactions. So sometimes there might be, a one-off situation that's really just an individual interaction with one representative, not the entire company as a whole. Some of the areas within the VRS are still subjective, and we would need to check our own biases. There's also potential workload challenges. Excuse me. So who would fill it out and how often that work would be. We've also talked about potentially weighing specific aspects of the scale to show what's more important. So let's take a look at the VRS. You have copies of the VRS in front of you so that I don't have to read the whole thing to you because it's going to be quite small. And I'm sorry, I know it's quite small on the sheet. It's a lot of text. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. Don't get worried about that. So as you can see, we have subcategories for each aspect. And then we also have on the scale, it's set out to not ideal as that low point, and then minimally acceptable in the middle, and then ideal. So this area is timeliness of communication, and this one is pretty objective because you can see its timelines that we've set for it. So for timeliness of communication, we focused on the average length of time that a representative takes to respond to our communication. Do they give us advance notice for major changes? The average amount of time to complete internal work for us, and the average amount of time between receipt of invoice and payment due dates. So that one's pretty straightforward. And then I'll go on to the next one. And this one, there is a lot of text on this one that I'm definitely not going to read the whole thing. And you'll probably have trouble even on your own page. So for this one, I'm really going to focus on that right-hand side because this would be everything is going perfectly in our interaction with a vendor, and we are at the ideal things are happening in a perfect world. So this is the accuracy of information category. So in the accuracy of information, in the subcategories, in the most ideal world, we verified with appropriate channels. The vendor has provided accurate information on their products and processes at least 95% of the time. So we've still tried to be objective and give that a percentage. The billing and cost information subcategory, the invoice has been received at least 1 month prior to the payment due, and it has the complete and updated billing information and no errors per contract cycle. Then we have a subcategory for our mark records, and in the ideal world, all records are provided at point of payment receipt. For the subcategory, the content is accurately reflected. For the most ideal, it's the content format, title list, date coverage is provided in a clear and easy to understand manner on the product website, and it avoids the use of company-specific jargon without appropriate explanation. Without appropriate explanation. And then for the sub-field availability of content, all of content would be provided within 5 days of order/invoice payment. And for the subcategory technical standards, for example, the accessibility, as we mentioned, that's important to us, and those authentication and cloud security. We would like the vendor to respond to their request for information within 5 business days and have no element out of compliance. So that's the accuracy of information. Then we have a category for respecting boundaries sets. This would include boundaries that we set for emails, calls, for example, responding to an email with a call. For this, we have 2 subcategories: communicating with appropriate identified library personnel. So at the high end for that we can focus on, we have prior to communicating with non-library university personnel or library users about library purchasing or platform content, access changes, the vendor would communicate with appropriate previously identified collection development personnel, and the vendor would be respectful about library direct communications with library users. And I'll point out that in this particular, both of these subcategories, at the low end, instead of it being not ideal as we had on the previous subcategories, we do have an unacceptable criteria. And if you see there, I know it's probably hard to see because of all the text, but those would be if the vendor uses disrespectful, discriminatory, harassing, racist, sexist, or hostile language. We did label those as unacceptable. We felt that that was important. So please note that. Then we have a subcategory for professionalism while being personable, and at the high end, that being friendly but personable, professional attitude, and respecting humanity, autonomy, individuality of all personnel, correctly names, genders, personnel, responds respectfully to any corrections or requests alternative communication. And then again, this was another subcategory where we had a criteria that would be unacceptable, and it mirrors the above subcategory, so I won't reread it, but it's very similar that you can see on your copy. And then we have our volume of interaction, the subcategory frequency and content of communication. At that ideal, we would have the vendor contacting us with necessary and essential information. So for examples of that, that would be updates with staff contacts, if those have changed, or the subscribed content changes, or contacting us with sales, conference meetings, and ideally no more than once per quarter. And the subcategory sales, those sales offerings, we would like them targeted to our needs and then give us at least 3 months' notice so that we would have time to take advantage of the sales offerings. And then we have our meeting requests subcategory, and we ask that the meeting request be scheduled no more or at least 3 weeks in advance and have an agenda attached. And also that a meeting is not required prior to provide us with a quote. So that was the VRS. Again, you have one in front of you, and we are happy to provide you with an electronic copy. We know that it's a lot to look at, a lot of text. And now I'm going to turn it over to Allyson with the discussion questions.
Okay, so now that your eyes have glazed over from looking at the teeny tiny print, please understand I was trying to save paper. It was all for like a good reason, okay? Plus I really didn't want to staple that many things together. My hand was tired after just stapling these. So, but now that you've gotten a good look at it and kind of understand our reasoning behind this, we want to talk to you. We want to hear from you. This is supposed to be a lively lunch discussion. I will just remind you and reiterate to those who weren't here first thing in the first part of the session, we do have a code of conduct. We expect you to be respectful. If you are not, I will ask you to leave, and I have no problem doing so. So, and that goes for everyone. I'm not just looking at vendors, I'm looking at librarians, you know who you are. Okay, so we will be kind of respectful. We're a group working together here. So the first thing, and we do have a mic set up here. If you would like to come up and give some answers to our questions, give responses to other conference attendees as to their ideas. We really want to hear, do you see something like this working at your institution? Do you think, how frequently do you think you might use this? And do we have these in the wrong order? Yes, I think we do. Okay. Just kidding, restart. Do you inform new librarians of this kind of information? And if yes, how so? And while I wait for people to kind of raise their hand or step towards the mic, I'll say, you know, part of this discussion started when we first hired Emily. And I was giving Emily some thoughts and I was like, oh, and this vendor, you need to start that negotiation like 6 months in advance. They take forever to get back to you. It's just a known thing. And Emily was like, wait, what? How do I know that? How do I plan for this workload and get all of this work done? And I'm like, oh, that information only lives in my brain from years of working with different vendors. I know this rep is going to respond to you within minutes. Like, I don't know how, but they do. I think they know the email I send before I send it. This other one is going to take a couple weeks for every response. So how do I pass that information on to new colleagues who may have had different reps from the company? How do I pass it on to new librarians? And how do I use this information to work with my administration so that they understand why I need 3 more positions instead of just the one that I have? Give a mic. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sunshine from Minnesota. I would say that one of the things we do in an orientation that we give new liaisons is we've created kind of negotiation standards. So we point them to that, which is publicly on our website, that explains when we will meet, when we won't meet. We also have canned language that we provide our liaisons to respond to vendors who want to meet when on campus, who want to meet at a conference, because sometimes it's they're not quite sure what they should do. And so we explain to them really that, if they have any questions, they can ask myself, collection development officer, or their coordinator, or anything like that. So we do we have documented everything that we like to do. But some of the stuff in here, like, this is amazing. I love this so much. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. That's interesting. I love that you make that canned language available, and you said it's on a website, right?
That is internal.
Internal, okay, okay, but the other, the
other
negotiation
language is
tips and
like,
stuff.
You need, if you wanna meet, we don't meet in person anymore, you need to send us an agenda, those
Yeah.
types of things.
And
And that's for vendors.
Yeah, I love that. We have a version of that actually I have a few print copies of in case anyone's interested in. It's a little half sheet that I created with Laurel back there when she worked at UNT, and it tells us how we work best together. But I love that you have it on the website. And
Hi, I'm Sarah presenting from Stanford Libraries, and I was actually just going to follow up on that, in that we don't give new librarians this information, but we do have an onboarding session for new vendor reps, which covers a lot of this, and so it was like a light bulb for me to be like, oh, right, internal staff might be first, and then onboarding documentation. But I have found it helpful to at least set the expectations for new people working with us of how we want them to work with us, and having some of this written down, I think will be even more helpful, so thank you for this.
yeah, and I love the idea of doing kind of an onboarding session, and I'm not a vendor, so I will not speak for vendors. I feel like some of the feedback I've gotten at other sessions similar to this where I've spoken, they've said, yes, oh my God, thank you for telling me what you expect. Like, I just wanna know what to do. I don't know what to do. You're all different. And so that's kind of the reaction I got. But I love that you have thought ahead to do kind of that onboarding for new vendor reps.
Hi, I'm Adam from Loyola Marymount Law School in Los Angeles. So I am one of those newer librarians that you were speaking of when you talk about this being useful to those. And by the way, I kind of jumping ahead to the next question, I think I completely agree. This is helpful not just from like the perspective of setting vendor expectations, but also from like, if I were handed this and this document kind of clearly lines up like what I should be looking for, and also like kind of the expectations of like how I should interact with the vendors in turn, that is something that is like incredibly helpful to me as like someone who has been in my acquisitions role for still less than a calendar year now. So, like huge help for that perspective too, from like the staff onboarding perspective, and just really, really love this idea. But to sort of speak to like, because I'm in a law school that has it's a smaller department, but it's also going to be working with like a more narrow selection of vendors. So this is not really information that it was kind of passed on the same way that you described before, where it's like it kind of comes down in a trickling way from like the higher ups, the people who've been here a little bit longer. And I think because of like in places like our more subject specific academic library, where we're dealing with like that smaller section of vendors, that kind of like I think it kind of changes the I guess the perceived urgency of like passing information on. But yeah, I think something like this is a huge help in those situations, so that we can just kind of track all that all together.
You still want to ask your question?
So I'm Vera Lamine from Bentley University, and yeah, I was just wondering, I think this is great. I was also wondering if maybe if you would benefit from, including your procurement department or getting ideas from your procurement department, because they have to, of course, they're not getting like library stuff, but you're getting other things like Peebles and chairs, and they have to work with vendors and contracts.
So that's a great idea. We haven't shared this yet with our procurement department. We do internal billing and invoicing. We have a special dispensation from our university from our procurement office to do payments and some of these other things. Our procurement office at UNT is in flux at the moment, I'll say. They're undergoing a major product change in what they're doing, and they're moving to a system version of procurement, which is super duper exciting and kind of a nightmare. But I do think maybe we could share this I'm thinking Patrice, perhaps we could share that. That's a great idea. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm Simon Bell from Bristol University Press, and I have to say this is really fantastic. I mean, we've just launched our platform last year, so for many of our team, it's the first time that they're going to be having a direct conversation, a dialogue with library staff without kind of intermediaries, and I think it's just really, really insightful, really valuable for us to make sure, or to really kind of set a policy and good practice as to how we should be kind of approaching you guys and making sure that we're providing you with the information that you want at the right time. So yeah, great.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Whitney Jordan. I'm with DeReuter. I had a question about the responsiveness and whether you differentiated between receiving a response, like almost letting you know they've seen your request, query, whatever, versus resolution to that response.
So we kind of did, if you look in the different areas of communication, where is it? I think it's in the teeny tiny one, the extra teeny tiny one, because they're all teeny tiny. But we talk about kind of internal, timeliness. So we have separated out average length of time for response and then time to complete internal work. Because we do understand and we do know, hey, y'all have a legal department who takes forever and a day to get back to you. Because shut up, we do too, who knew? Like what? Like we totally get that. And so we do understand that sometimes it's not representative of you, but as if you're my rep, it's not a representation of you, but we do allow more time for that because we understand they're servicing the whole company versus just you who's kind of our one-on-one. So we do understand that. Now, I will ask, where we want to be reasonable. This is, we don't want to put really crazy undue expectations on vendors. Like that is not our intent. We are kind of this is a flexible document. So to you, is it reasonable to say, hey, 15 business days, that's 3 weeks of work. Is that long enough to generally get internal work back? Now, if, we see, and I will say, this is not like a grade. You're not going to fail out of being our vendor if you take, more than 2 weeks to respond. Like, it's okay, let's be reasonable about this, but we want to get an idea of, in general, how much time does it take? Because like I said, telling Jill and Emily as they come on board, hey, DeGruyter is super fast, even their legal team is super fast. They know that, come into budget cycle, we can purchase from DeGruyter because it's going to be a super fast process. Whereas if we know from ABC vendor, their legal department is really slow. It takes them 4 weeks to get back to the vendor rep every time. Okay, then that's not going to be a good one for the end of year. We cannot do that. We cannot plan our workload around that. Let's focus on them in another time of the year.
Hi, I'm Samantha and I do licensing at UC Berkeley. And I actually think this would be great to share with our subject librarians who place the orders for our resources. A few of them have been kind of frustrated if the process takes a while and they don't quite understand the delays on the vendor side, especially if the resource needs to go to their outside legal counsel or there's turnover in their staff. And it's been hard to communicate that to them because there are differences based on vendors. And so I think it would be great to compile this data for us personally so that we can share that with our subject librarians and kind of give them expectations based on each individual publisher. and other internal stakeholders who are curious. So this is great, thank you.
Yeah, I love that, and I will say, like I said, you know, both for sharing with those subject librarians, sharing with faculty who, Lord love them, they try and ask for an entire brand new database on a platform that we've never seen with a vendor we've never bought for, and they want it next week, and I'm like, well, you're gonna have to wait, sorry friend. Really letting them know, hey, here, we've worked with this vendor before, but our average length of time of acquisition or even for a response is 5 days. Is setting that expectation up front is very helpful. I think there's one back here.
Yes.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Hi, I'm Dan from RIT. I just wanted to circle back to someone who asked about sharing this with the procurement department. We kind of have procurement review all of our things. Basically, we got audited and they're like, oh, you don't do this. We're like, so now we do, which is good. But my advice is to kind of preload your procurement department with what things mean. So you don't have to write the same email. Yeah, we authenticate people. Yes, this is what interlibrary loan means. It's very helpful in terms of their quick turnaround time, in terms of actually getting a response back within 2 weeks.
Gotcha.
I actually had another question. Do you provide, so like, it's great to ask vendors for this, but do you provide this sort of thing back to your vendors?
So we haven't gotten that far yet. We're still kind of gathering the feedback on the tool itself. But we are looking to eventually kind of be able to tell vendors, hey, just for your information, this is kind of what we're looking at, here's what we see. We're not asking our vendors to fill this out. We are filling this out as we interact with them. And that's part of a workload question that we're actually going to get to here in a little bit.
Thanks.
Great question. And I think one over here. Oh, and up front as well.
I think I was, but
Go ahead.
I'm not sure.
I am Cynthia Cronincarden from the University of Pennsylvania, the Business Library, and I am a subject librarian, so I was really interested in what you had to say because I'm wondering if you have a description of how long or what steps your process is with vendors so that our expectations are reasonable, and also we're the people who are usually getting the requests from the frantic faculty, and if we had something that we could show them that we'd love to help you, and but this is reality, and versus the other thing, I guess one of my underlying anxieties about this whole process is that the faculty have deadlines also to finish their research so that it can be published and shared.
We 100% understand. And I will say, thank you for coming. I love hearing from subject librarians. I work really hard to talk with all of our subject librarians. A little plug for myself. If you go to ERNL next year, I have put in a proposal about some of the ways that I share what happens in the back of the house with the front of the house. Some of the diagrams and illustrations that I've used to share this type of information with subject librarians, because they don't know, and that's okay, they don't need to know, but having a base understanding is really helpful. So I have something that we call ping pong. Laurel is voicing it along with me. So yeah, we have ping pong where I show, it starts with the requester, and then it goes to this, and it goes to that, and then it goes over here, and then it goes to legal, then it goes back to the vendor and their legal, and then it goes over here, and then it goes over there, and kind of explaining just, exactly how many steps. And I have another kind of flow chart type of item that shows you all the different steps and areas where there's certain sticking points and explains some of that. So, but I do think I have a couple of my really strong super users, my super subject librarians that I will be sharing this with for sure. I'm so glad to hear that you think it would be helpful too, and to share with faculty as well. And then I think this gentleman up here, and I see you just around the column there.
Hi, my name is John Dove, and I've been to 20 Charleston's ever since 2004. So I love this topic, by the way. I think this is really important. But oddly enough, there was a discussion on exactly this topic in 2017, and then again in 2018 at the Library Publishing Forum. Barbara DeFelice and David Shearer and Jonathan Bull. And I just looked over the list of things it was basically the social norms that should drive negotiations with publishers. There's no overlap. So I don't know whether these problems from 2017 have all been solved, or if you all looked at them and then decided, oh, no, that doesn't matter. So things like, you should have no gag orders. You insist that publishers shouldn't be allowed to put you into a gag order. Do they allow unbundling? Do they have different agreements for what is the rule in UK authors and the US authors? And there were some papers that were spread around that time, one by I forget her name, from University of Montana, who talked about throwing sand into the gears of scholarly communication. So they talked about all the policies that various publishers would do, which was basically throwing sand into preventing open access to be fully engaged. So things like preventing green, or by not having a standard for the population of articles into information repositories. Because if someone used one standard and someone used another, and then you wouldn't be able to actually do it depending on which publisher it was. So and there's sort of no overlap. So I'd love to be able to just pass along to you to see those, because maybe you looked at these and rejected them, or maybe it covers things you didn't look at.
So those, I will say, so we have a rubric for our licenses, and we consider those to be kind of licensing terms which fall under these. But what we have here is specifically about the interactions between the people, not about the policies, not about the what's on paper.
I see. All right, never mind.
No, but I totally agree, and I do think there definitely needs to be an integration and an overlap of these, and I don't think either should really be used in in isolation from the other. Like they need to be interactive, and knowing that a vendor that you're working with to move to OA or to allow for green, knowing that they take 3 weeks for their, that can definitely put a damper on the possibility of even, moving forward with that type of agreement, because it's like, I don't have the people and I don't have the time to sit here and wait and check up every 4 weeks, every month, because for 6 months, because that's one of, just for reference, we have over 700 contracts that we're responsible for, that we have identified. So that's just what we have right now, and what you're looking at, plus 2 acquisitions associates, that's what we got.
Yeah, so this was a list that was focused on licensing kind of.
Yeah, this is not focused on the licensing
unabashed,
portion,
yeah.
but this is more on those interpersonal relationships between librarians and vendors. But you do bring up a good point there. In the back behind the column, okay.
I'm just gonna make a quick comment, because I know I talked already. And just in response to that very excellent observation, I would venture to guess that a lot of what was talked about several years ago has not been resolved. And as a result of that, we're now in a different, wanting to change the conversation to how do then we even talk to one another in the same room? Like, how can we be productive? If we can't solve the fact that it feels like sand is being thrown into the gears of scholarly communication, if we can't solve that, then let's at least have some norms for how we can work together and how we can feel safe in an environment where we're negotiating. That was my sense of sort of where this came from.
I would agree. And I think Beth in the corner there.
Hi, and thank you very much. I'm Sherry Edwards from the University of Florida. And I actually have a couple of comments to share about the negotiating process relative to something like this, which by the way is fantastic. When I think about things like negotiation and then the how you do it, you know, how you be polite, professional, ethical. I know that one of the things I have been looking at, and it's kind of hard to find, is in the business community where they have negotiation conferences, just whole conferences based on that. So if anybody has any recommendations, you can find me, Sherry Edwards at UF, and you're welcome to email me. And so another thing I'd like to add, and I don't mean to get out of bounds, but I was just at a lunch and we had a conversation about concerns that these kinds of things don't seem to be being taught in library school. And I'd also like to offer that perhaps as the accrediting body, the ALA should also be getting more involved in this part of things, especially with laws taking place in Texas and Florida. I mean, we're fearful that in our state, it's the university library that's the next target.
In
So-
Texas, we agree. We are feeling that pain too. I just want you to know you are Florida, my painful
sister.
partner. Yeah, my sister over there.
But those are, I just wanted to not ask a question because I'm going to take another handout besides my marked up one and talk about it. So just to say I appreciate it, but these do bring up some really good discussions about the underlying currency of what's going on here. So thank you very much.
And I would agree, and I definitely, my hope is to be able to build some, we do have a library school at UNT. My hope is to be able to build some inroads with those faculty and share this type of information. Once, many moons ago, I did, I did do some adjuncting over there and shared some of the other things that I had done in the past around this type of area. So my hope is that, Jill, are you teaching that again?
No, I did.
Yeah, so Jill taught it as well. She did adjuncted for the same course. So my hope is to be able to kind of share that again as well, maybe in some other areas. All right, I feel like there was another hand and it went up and down real quick. Okay, so I'm gonna ask, I love this discussion, but I am in theory going to ask another question. Okay, so just to kind of ask y'all directly, looking at this document, and I want vendor feedback as well. Are these reasonable? Are these doable within your scope? What is one thing that you might change about this document? And then, you know, because we all like a good pat on the back, what is one thing that you like about it? And again, I should have brought magnifying glasses as well. That would have been a really good conference handout, a nice little UNT magnifying glass at every spot.
This is Frank from EBSCO. I think the document is great. I think that you're more than generous. 80% of the time, be accurate is, you know, talk about low.
Right, yeah.
Low bar, so.
We set a pretty low bar this time.
But
You'd be amazed though.
But I do want to agree with what Dan said, that at some point it might be useful to turn this document around and send it to a vendor and say, hey, you're in the first column, you don't want to be there. So if you want to earn our business, you better move out of it. So I think, you know, probably all vendors would love to hear the feedback of where do we stand and make sure we're doing right. So.
Love that idea. And it's great to know that y'all are open to that kind of feedback. I definitely know, not to plug EBSCO, but I do have a couple of really, really wonderful EBSCO reps who I know without a doubt would be in a pretty high column in most of these. So, and I see that being both a positive to share, hey, y'all are a wonderful partner, thank you so much. And in that negative category of, hey, you know, y'all are taking a really long time to respond to us, and it is hampering our ability to do business with you. So I agree, and I love the idea of sharing that with the vendors as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great, like a great inspiration for me. I mean, I would modify it so that I could better explain what I do as an electronic resources librarian to maybe outside departments like procurement or legal counsel. Just because, you know, we have such a variety of resources at a business school, right? It's not just databases, right? I mean, we just always talk about databases or whatever they are, right? But, you know, we're publishers, data providers. And so it would help me to structure my conversations with other people.
Absolutely. I think there's one here kind of in the middle.
Hi, Josh Young, Phoenix Bioinformatics. And my only suggestion would be, you know, this is someone on the vendor side, is when you start a new relationship, share this document or whatever document you're using prior to, you know, deciding what column you're in, right? And, because we do want to have a good relationship, and some of it we can provide extra information that makes it easier for both of us. Like in my case, we use external legal counsel, and so if it's something we've encountered before, they've probably already answered the question. But if we discover Texas has passed a new law and we're going to have to go to them, we can tell you in that kind of situation, it's going to take longer, right? Like,
and that's wonderful for us to know. We love when vendors share information like that. Like, that is so helpful for me to know, oh, you have outside legal representation. Here's the new thing that's coming. Heck, this is going to take a lot longer than we expected. And so being able to, that helps us prepare our workload, because we know that's going to be an extended negotiation. It helps us speak with our administration, especially if we're coming up on the end of a fiscal year and we're not sure if a very, very, very large invoice is going to be paid because of contract negotiations. You know, that really helps us a lot if we know those types of things. So I'd love to see the vendor response to it in providing that information. So I love the idea of, you know, as we, you know, maybe do a new vendor rep onboarding, we do provide this to them.